Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of FISHTORY. I'm Alexander Williamson, your host as always, and today we are talking about one of my all-time favorite fish, the gold ring Danio, or the tinwini Danio, the Brachydanio tinwini. Let's take a look. All right, let's talk about this absolutely incredible fish, the beautiful gold ring Danio. Well, it was discovered in 2009 by Colander and Fang, two ichthyologists that are known for exploring Myanmar, Thailand, Laos, and all over the borderland regions there, as well as southern China and Malaysia. This fish was an absolute hit immediately. Even though most people know it for its gold or silver coloration, with the males being more of a brassy tone and a bit of a salmon hue kind of underlaid under that, and the females a nice golden hue with a fatter silver belly, these fish have subtle colors that are absolutely out of this world. And if you provide them with the right habitat and the right water parameters, you will be rewarded with a fish unlike any other in the hobby. It goes from looking like the most unassuming little $4 to $7 fish to an absolute treasure full of color and color changing hues, as well as absolutely dazzling displays of mating rituals and showing off for its lucky chance at mating with the female. Discovered in 2009, they were popularized and exported by a man named Yu Tin Win, and there is where they got their name, the tinwini Danio. Now, Brachyodanios are similar to normal Danios, only a bit smaller and a little more slender. The glowlight or Chopra Danio is also in this group, as is the Kaifit Danio, which both happen to have beautiful hues of color that are visible both when they're spawning or just when they're happy in an aquarium community. Now, what does it take to make these fish happy in an aquarium community? Well, it's emulating where they come from. And where they come from is tropical waters that extend up river valleys and through creeks and meandering rivers to high elevations. Now, the river valleys may start at only 400 or 500 feet above sea level, maybe 100 to 200 meters above sea level. And at the bottom of the valley is 8,000 to 10,000 years of agricultural rice paddy growing and humans living by flooding their fields during the wet or monsoon season, and the river taking over and absolutely cutting new pathways all over the place during that very wet and sudden 3 to 4 month season. After that, the waters take a while and keep trickling in from the snow-topped mountains that are in the region. This region is so far north in Myanmar that it reaches southern China, and the very northernmost part of Myanmar is the actual foothills of the Himalayas. And so you have glaciers, you have snowpack, and you have monsoon rains. All of this leads to an incredibly lush environment. Especially when down at around 500 feet above sea level, you have tropical temperatures. It allows for a zone where tropical fish to semi-tropical fish absolutely flourish. And this is the same case with fish like the celestial pearl Danio and the emerald dwarf rasbora, or the erythromicron. Brachiodanio simply means small Danio. Brachio, that first part, the prefix, is a Greek word, and Danio is from the Bangla language, from a word that was known as Dani, and Dani is a reference to little minnows, or tiny, shiny minnows, tiny metallic fish. So put that together, and you have Brachyodani, or Brachiodanio, as it was later anglicized, and we have our fish named. Now, they were discovered, as I said, in 2009 by Colander and Fang, two ichthyologists exploring this region of beautiful tropical rice paddies and jungles with braided rivers all throughout them. And while humans have lived off this land for over 10,000 years using agriculture in some of the oldest established civilizations known in the world, they have found ways to work with nature and not to ruin the environment for these fish. However, we are facing challenges in the future because since the late 1980s and early 1990s, Western petrochemical companies have been selling pesticides and fertilizers that put high amounts of ammonia, nitrites, nitrates, and other chemicals into the water, which cause massive algae blooms, cyanobacteria, and sudden die-offs, especially in flooded fields and flooded streams nearby that oftentimes catch all the runoff from the irrigation ditches. Now, while these fish are found in the beautiful and massive river valley of the Irrawaddy River, which runs nearly the entire length of Myanmar, and basically all the rivers in the country kind of feed off of it or connect up with it and then go up into the mountains, Myanmar is kind of like a giant valley. And the water that these fish live in is a lot of glacial melt, it's a lot of rainwater, and it's aerated as it flows over rapids and fast-moving water coming down mountains and hillsides and ends up in slow-moving lakes and floodplains. However, we need to replicate some of these same situations in our aquarium if we hope to get the same kind of happy behavior and colorful patterns in our fish, is plants, algae, and microfauna. So as you can see here, you can put pretty plants in, you can use CO2, or you can put just tons of random plants in your aquarium. It's not going to matter to the fish in that sense. Make sure that you also have shrimp and snails in the aquarium. For these fish are too small to eat any adult shrimp of any species, but definitely a mono shrimp and Neocaridina adult shrimp are even bigger than these fish when they're fully grown most of the time. And all of this helps create a food web that allows these fish to constantly be eating microorganisms, algae, and rich layers of microdiversity on surfaces in the aquarium like this would. Having algae already established is something that they will greatly appreciate, and having a diversity of plants and fish with fine leaf plants is another something that they will greatly appreciate. Now, because their water comes from the mountains, the glaciers, and the rainfall, it is very soft to begin with. And while it does run over bedrock and karst stone in a lot of parts of Southeast Asia, it doesn't take on a whole lot of minerality. So having a KH, or rather a DKH, the degrees of carbonate hardness, somewhere between 4 and 6, or rather a general hardness of around 5 to 10, will make these fish happiest. And you want to keep your pH somewhere between 6.0 and 7.5, with 6.5 to 7.0 being their favorite. Now, these fish occur only in one specific river off the Irrawaddy Basin, and that is the Mogong River, or the Mogong Chong, which is the Burmese local tribal word for river or stream is Chong. So when we say the Mogong Chong, it just means the Mogong River, so it's redundant to say that twice. However, it's in the Kachin state, and it is in and amongst many, many other really beautiful fish that are very diverse, because these mountain ranges and these meandering rivers actually flow and change so much with those massive amounts of rains that they cut off the next valley over oftentimes. The rivers also switch back on themselves and create what we call oxbow lakes, and that has allowed literally hundreds of different little cyprinid species to evolve in shallow water with tons of bugs and nutrients at their fingertips, or their fin tips, as it were, for them to thrive. Now, if you want to get these fish to breed, in the wild they really only breed right after the wet season has kind of wrapped up. It is when all the fields of rice, all of the flooded jungles, and all of the old river banks and grassy plains have been covered by a few inches to a few feet of water that they have their fry, and their fry are able then to disperse and, populate those regions all along their location. When they're getting ready to spawn, you'll see the males showing off just like that. The two males that you just saw showed off fin size and color, and this is such a peaceful species that they won't fight one another or bite one another. They'll simply decide who gets the girl based on who looks the best doing their dance and showing off. That showed who had the best access to color enhancing foods, which also carry access to a lot of other things like protein, fat, and unusual or hard to find nutrients that are essential for the fry to grow up and for them to be able to fertilize large amounts of fry and pass on healthy and viable DNA. So when you see these fish getting ready to spawn in your aquarium, which they will actually do year round in aquarium settings, you just simply want to move them to their own species tank. While it's great to have them in a community tank, as they are peaceful and they'll swim around the top and they will do all sorts of fascinating behaviors, some are based on mating, some are based on feeding, and some are based on just the time of day and the amount of light. But you can watch them and you'll see that the females have a big full belly of eggs. That belly reflects a beautiful silver color, and that means that any predators below her will look up at her and only see the reflection of UV light scattered, like the sky looking up from the bottom of a pool staring up at the sky. Looking down on these fish, you'll see a hazy color, or almost a milky chocolate tone, almost a brown tone, and that is because after the wet season, these rivers get very churned up and they look very milky, like the Mississippi River or like any of those rivers in Southeast Asia. So they are a completely peaceful fish, as I mentioned, and it's best to keep them in groups of 8, 9 at a minimum. If you can get a group of 15 to 20 or more, it's all the better. You will see even more incredible behavior, better colors, and more active fish that are less shy. These fish can oftentimes be out-competed in your aquarium, and they're fish that eat little bugs and insects all day long. So getting something like an auto feeder isn't a bad idea if you're not home during the day, because they want to be eating little microorganisms and little snacks all day long to deal with their quick metabolism and their constant swimming in the top and middle waters. Once they are ready to have their babies and you're seeing the signs of the plump silver belly and the males showing off color and showing off finnage to one another and spinning around, dancing, you can move them to another tank and put down either mesh or some sort of marbles or smooth river rocks, and overnight they will usually lay eggs there. After a day or two of putting 2 to 3 females and 2 or 3 males in a chamber that you set up for this, you can take out the parents and raise the eggs on their own. Now, it is possible in a very densely planted tank like this one over here to raise them in a colony-style breeding situation. However, the plants need to be so thick that the adults really can't see the fry, and they have a chance to grow up eating microorganisms and a food web that's established within the tank beyond what you just feed the fish daily. All right, so when we're talking about these fish, after you've spawned them, you're going to need to feed any one of these egg-scattering Divarios or Danios, Rasboras, basically any of the small cyprinids in that entire group. You're going to want to feed them live infusoria or paramecium food for the first week to week and a half of their life. After this, they can eat things like vinegar eels, brand new baby brine shrimp, or things like cyclops and small daphnia. After another month or so, you can switch them over to flake food like fluval bug bites, golden pearls if you have access to those, or you can use things like cold pressed krill flake and a little bit of frozen food in there as well. Just look at the incredible colors that come and go in these males as they show off. The pink, the peach, the metallic hues, and that beautiful gold eye. Absolutely stunning. Alright, so the last thing I want to talk about with these fish is the fact that they are facing some threats. And it's not just the gold ring Danios, it's also the Kai-fit Danio here, which is found to the north of the main grouping of these fish and also found over towards India more and Bangladesh. And these fish are all under threat in the Brachydanio group that are not inside of the Thai border, essentially, in that they are facing a revolution of how people in the region get by and survive. Everything from using vehicles that drip oil on the streets and leak gasoline and fuel and hydraulic fluid and all sorts of nasty stuff into the street, and then it gets washed out by those massive rains and floods, to other things like plastics and pollution that just comes with a city and with millions and millions of people building up a society that used to be an agricultural-based farming society that was all organic. And now we're seeing that they are partnering with people like China, the UN, the US, and European allies to get a hold of higher production food crops, higher yield crops, and that has caused
both them to be able to make more money than they historically had in the region, which has brought more infrastructure into the region, which has brought more people into the region, along with the fact that now they can nutritionally support a very large number of new residents and new babies in a massive baby boom that has gone on in the country. So hopefully they will see the value of these tiny little fish, the Danio. Hopefully they will realize the economic value, if not just the intrinsic value of these beautiful creatures. I know that daily this is my favorite group of fish to stare at, and I'm always learning something new about their behavior and about their preferences, how they react with flowing water versus water changes. And another little note here is you're going to want to do at least a 50% water change weekly if you want to see them at their brightest colors. I don't know what it is about it, but something really makes them happy about a water change. Maybe it's signaling the monsoon or some ancient inherited trait that they have hidden deep in their brain. Either way, these are my all-time favorite nano fish, right up there with celestial pearl Danios, and they pair absolutely terrifically with just about any peaceful fish under 2 inches, and they do great with shrimp as well as snails also. So they're just about the perfect fish for any aquascape or any community tank. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and I hope you learned a lot, and I hope you give these fish a chance. Both Dan's Fish and Moonlight Aquatics keeps these in stock and has a great source on them, and that's where I got these fish. So go ahead and check any of those places out, as well as Imperial Tropicals or Aquatic Arts. If you check out Aquatic Arts, I can get you 15% off with the code FISHTORY15, all caps. If you're on Moonlight Aquatics, I can get you 10% off with FISHTORY10, FISHTORY10. And with Dan's Fish, you just enter Alex when you check out, and I can get you 10% off your first order and a little bit off your future orders after that. All that info is in the description, and if you want to help out the channel so I can do these deep dives, you can always become a member or check us out on Discord, and all that info is in the description. Thanks for hitting that like button and sharing, as always. Much love, you guys, and I'll see you next time.